Greenland has turned into one of the most discussed places on Earth lately, and it might become the single most discussed country soon because the island is seriously debating independence from Denmark. Meanwhile, in the US, people are already rubbing their hands, dreaming of turning Greenland into the 51st state. But what exactly did everyone suddenly find so fascinating about this massive, mostly frozen rock with only 56,000 residents? Get comfortable, friends. In the next couple of minutes, we're getting Vikings, political intrigue, and even nuclear disasters, because Greenland's past makes its importance impossible to ignore. You're watching Secret Chapters. Hit like and let's start. And by tradition, we begin from a distance, so far back that I'm going to say it bluntly. Greenland is a historically and fairly North American landmass, at least geologically. We're used to mentally filing Greenland under Europe, but physically it leans toward America. Iceland, the closest European neighbor, is about 320 kilometers away, while Canada's Ellesmere Island sits just 26 kilometers from Greenland's coast. And the big detail is tectonics. Greenland sits on the North American plate. Iceland, by comparison, is practically Greenland's offspring. All those Icelandic volcanoes and hot springs, they sit on a rift system that, in a very real sense, is tied to Greenland's ancient position. Around 70 million years ago, Greenland was sitting where that action was, and as the crust shifted, the rift moved toward the Denmark Strait and pushed up the seafloor, creating Iceland. That's why Iceland is a permanent argument. Which continent does it belong to? Don't tell Donald Trump, but some geologists even lean North America for Iceland if you look at deep history, though geographically it's a weird 50-50 case and half of it is definitely European. Greenland, though, is not a debate. Geologically, it's straight North American. And for tens of millions of years, Greenland was even... And here it's tempting to jump straight to Vikings, colonizers, and Denmark, but the human story starts earlier. The first people on Greenland weren't Vikings at all. They were Inuit moving in from northern Canada, maybe even from Alaska. Archaeology there is hard even today. Imagining survival back then is even harder. Still, evidence points to people living there around 4,500 years ago. The Sakop culture left DNA traces, stone tools, and even hut-like structures. Later came the Independence and Dorset cultures. The finds aren't huge, but they're enough to show something important. Greenland had human life for roughly 5,000 years, and that life kept arriving from Canada, wave after wave of stubborn Inuit pushing into the very edge of where humans can live. And only about 4,000 years after those earliest waves, closer to 980, Vikings enter the story. Eric the Red gets exiled from Iceland for killing a neighbor, sails to an island whose outline could be seen from Iceland in clear weather, and then comes back and basically brands it as Greenland. Scholars still argue why. One popular version is that he was trolling, but the medieval climate optimum was real, and we have strong evidence that even northern Norway was pulling off double grain harvests near the Arctic Circle. So it's not crazy to imagine some Greenland coastal areas were greener than you'd expect. Still, the most convincing version is simple marketing. Eric named it Greenland to bait settlers, selling a harsh place like it was a promised land full of beauty and resources.
The one thing science can say with confidence is this: 450,000 years ago, at a spot called DA3 in southern Greenland, researchers in 2023 pulled material out of the ice that proved the area once had pines, spruces, alder, even yew, plus swarms of flies, beetles, butterflies, and moths. The reason is simple. Greenland used to sit farther south, and it was genuinely warmer. Summers climbed above 10 degrees Celsius. Winters rarely dipped below -15. Basically an Oslo or Murmansk kind of climate. Uncomfortable, but absolutely livable. And sea levels were lower then too, meaning some of the best habitats from that period are now literally underwater and hidden from us. But all of that happened hundreds of thousands of years before Eric the Red. His era is a different story, and his push turned Greenland, for its time, into a colonial megacity, around 400 homes and multiple settlements. Their main business was trade with Europe, walrus tusks, but they also raised sheep and they fished hard, just like people still do today. And if Vikings could sail 300 kilometers from Iceland, it's hard to believe they didn't also make the 30-kilometer hop the other way to North America, which is why Greenlanders ended up being the first Europeans to introduce North America to Europe. Politically, the colony entered Norway in 1261, and then in 1380 it fell under a union tied to the Danish crown. Then the climate flipped. The warm optimum gave way to a colder minimum, and at the same time, Inuit pressure from Canada increased again. The result is that by 1408, the European settlements basically died out, and for about 150 years, Greenland had no Europeans at all, only Inuit. Why that colony vanished is a fascinating historical mystery worth reading about on its own. Greenland then gets recolonized in 1578 under Denmark again, because Denmark still legally considered the island its territory. Technological progress made returning possible, at least for whaling. Along the way, 3 Inuit were brought to the metropole, and the German scholar Adam Olearius noticed their traits and habits reminded him of northern peoples he'd seen in Russia. After that comes a dull stretch, where the biggest headline is the Battle of Jacobshavn, Denmark and the Netherlands fighting over whaling. Denmark wins and slowly rebuilds control, though not smoothly, because locals keep complaining that Denmark's trade monopoly is holding the island back. Greenland makes it through World War I under Denmark and is pre-declared neutral, but World War II changes everything because aviation and naval power make Greenland strategic overnight. Germany occupies Denmark and wants Greenland as a forward base, but on April 9, 1941, the US signs an agreement with the Danish government in exile to use Greenland. In practice, during WW II, it's Americans supplying, building, and trading with the island. You could call it temporary colonial management. And after the war, the US starts wanting it permanent because Greenland's geography is just too perfect. It sits between Europe and America like a locked door key. William Henry Seward saw this coming way back in 1867 and tried to buy both Greenland and Iceland for the US, but got turned down. Denmark turns the US down again in 1946, refusing $100 million. And Denmark got lucky with timing because the Cold War hadn't fully kicked in yet, so the US stepped back and settled for close cooperation. But from 1947, Greenland becomes a core piece of American security logic. Time magazine even illustrated it in 1947 by showing the Earth from above and drawing attack radius circles. Greenland and Alaska make the USSR, Asia, and even Japan look close. Launch sites are easy to conceal, and missiles can fly over the North Pole where there are no people and almost no surveillance. For the US, Greenland is an unsinkable aircraft carrier, permanently anchored in the best spot on the map. That's how Thule Air Base appears, and American military presence grows, creating tension with locals. The tension peaks in 1968 with a nuclear disaster. A B-52 crashes near the base with 6 hydrogen bombs on board.
Officially, they said no contamination, but locals kept insisting that for generations afterward, animals were still being born with deformities. And then there was an even wilder plan, Project Iceworm. The idea was for the US to hide ICBM launch sites under Greenland's ice. They even built a small town to support it. But after 8 years, reality won. Glaciers don't sit still, they shift unpredictably, which means you can't reliably hide anything under them. The project got scrapped. The problem is, the trash didn't. A lot of the waste, including radioactive waste, was simply abandoned inside the ice. That's why environmentalists are still losing their minds today. The ice is melting, and those presents could end up leaking into Greenland's environment and into the food chain of every country buying Greenlandic products. And there are plenty of buyers, because Greenland's fishing industry is hugely profitable. But it's also a headache for Denmark, because geographically, Greenland trades mostly with North America, Canada, and the US simply because they're closer. That became especially painful once Denmark and Greenland were pulled into the EU framework. Even in 1982, people were already talking about independence, specifically so Greenland could keep trading with America without tariffs. Back then, it was solved by giving Greenland massive autonomy, its own flag, its own official language, and a foreign policy that's effectively independent in practice. And since 2009, Greenland has also had the right to control its own mineral resources. And the numbers are serious: about 31.4 billion barrels of oil and 4.2 trillion cubic meters of gas. But Greenland worries about environmental fallout, so in 2021, it banned extraction entirely, which obviously annoys both Denmark and the US. The thing is, Greenland doesn't really care that much what they want. Around 90% of the island's population are Inuit descendants from North America, while descendants of European colonizers make up only about 10%. That's why, for a lot of researchers, the question of an independent Greenland is almost rhetorical. It's not if, it's when. But that's already another story. For now, you've got the full historical context. So, what should Greenland do next? Stay with Denmark, go independent, or join the US? Drop your take in the comments. And if you liked the episode, hit like and subscribe. New videos soon. See ya!